Mr. Pritam Singh.
Question 3, sir.
There's been a request to take question 3 and question 4 together. So the Minister for Manpower will answer question 3 and the Minister for Trade and Industry question 4, and we'll take the supplementary questions immediately after the response to question 4. Minister for Manpower.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The 23 Industry Transformation Maps, or ITMs, were launched progressively from late 2016, with the majority launched in 2018. Changes in the workforce profile depend on a variety of factors which can be structural or cyclical in nature. To assess the impact of the ITMs, it will be more meaningful to look at the employment outcomes over the medium and long term. Nonetheless, we can look at employment change across the 23 ITM sectors from 2015, before the launch of the ITMs, to 2018. Between 2015 and 2018, total employment in these sectors, excluding foreign domestic workers, grew by 19,500. And this was made up of an increase in employment of Singapore citizens by 39,300, an increase in employment of permanent residents by 8,600, a decrease in employment of foreigners by 28,500. These numbers are encouraging because we have been making the effort to secure jobs for Singaporeans. We are making progress on this front. Singaporeans have consistently worked hard to update our skills and stay relevant. And between 2015 and 2018, the training participation rate of the resident labour force aged from 15 to 64 increased from 35% to 48%, which shows that more Singaporeans are upgrading and updating their skills. And from 2016 until September 2019, Workforce Singapore and NTUC's E2I have also helped 93,000 locals move into new jobs through the Adapt and Grow initiative. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, let me take PQ number 4. Between 2008 and 2018, Singapore's total factor productivity, or TFP, grew by 0.5% per annum. This is about 12% of our GDP growth of 4.5% per annum over the same period. Since 2016, TFP growth has increased to 0.9% per annum, or around 27% of our GDP growth. Singapore's TFP performance was stronger than or comparable to most OECD countries. Between 2008 and 2018, France's total TFP rose by 0.3% per annum, while Finland's TFP growth was 0% per annum. TFP growth in Germany and the United States was similar to ours at about 0.5% per annum. The pickup in our TFP growth in recent years can be attributed to our economic restructuring efforts, which are important to raise productivity and to transform our industries through innovation and internationalization. It can also have Skills Futures initiatives like the Skills Future to upskill our workers and support lifelong learning would have also contributed to this. Transforming our economy and raising TFP are long-term efforts. We are making progress, but we must continue to focus on these areas in the years ahead, building on the strong tripartite partnership between government, employers, and the labour movement.
Mr. Pritam Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few supplementary questions for the Minister of State for Manpower. The first question pertains to the data that was shared. The parliamentary question seeks information for each of the ITMs. I understand Minister of State said that the ITMs are launched in different years, so it would be more useful to provide data in a certain manner. But there's information provided for Singaporeans, PRs, and foreigners between the years 2015 and 2018. Within these years, which ITMs is the Minister of State referring to vis-à-vis the numbers 39,000 Singaporeans, PRs 8,600, and foreigners having lesser numbers, and that number I believe was 28,500. So which ITMs is the Minister of State referring to? The second question is the statistics for Adapt and Grow, 93,000 locals. And I understand locals would mean PRs and Singaporeans. And can the Minister confirm that? And can he also share the number of Singaporeans and PRs on Adapt and Grow between these years? My third question really pertains to how information on the ITMs is presented. The roadmaps are not consistent in terms of jobs for Singaporeans, PRs, or foreigners, for example. I'll give you an example. Construction ITM. If you go on the YouTube channel and you see reference on construction, it's very clear. Good jobs for Singaporeans. No two ways about that. You go to the retail ITM, they talk about a future-ready workforce and a professional and skilled workforce. So ostensibly, this would mean a whole range beyond Singaporeans. Infocom and media talks about creating new PMAT jobs, 13,000 new PMAT jobs, and it goes on. So every ITM is different, understandably so. But will the ministry in future and going forward present their data very clearly for each ITM? PRs, this many. Singaporeans, this many. And there are obvious reasons for this. The conversation becomes more fact-based, and you don't have a corrosive conversation about Singaporeans losing jobs to foreigners, etc.
So I thank the member for his questions. The ITMs relate to all the 23 ITMs that you asked for. As I mentioned earlier, the ITMs were only launched in 2016, with the majority of them coming on stream in 2018. So the data is still preliminary. So it will take time. It's more meaningful and impactful to measure them as we talk about medium-term and long-term developments. So many of these developments are transformative. We're transforming industries, transforming companies, doing job redesign. So it will take time. But the initial indicators look promising, but I do agree, and that's why we have not gone to detail yet, because it will take some time to stabilize the data. But currently, MOM provides employment statistics by local, foreign breakdown in broad sectors, manufacturing, construction, and services in our annual market labor report. So those are already available between local and foreign breakdown. And currently, we need to also follow industry classification of employment stats, which follows statistical standards aligned to international convention and ensures compatibility with employment statistics that have been published in previous years. So it becomes meaningful. It's not just meaningful to put up stats, but you have to also put comparability. And so we are making progress, but really there's still a lot of work to do as we transform, and I think it will take time for data to stabilize, and something that we can look to and study how we can present this better in the medium and long term. So I take the member's point.
Mr. Leong Eng Hwa.
So perhaps I can ask three further questions on this matter of ITMs. Firstly, have the ITMs make any impact on our economic growth and our job creation? Secondly, have the economic growth and job creation benefited Singaporeans? And thirdly, have the economic growth and job creation benefited Singaporeans more than foreigners?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, let me address Mr. Leong Eng Hwa's three questions holistically, and that's the reason why I think it's useful for us to consider both the ITM questions and the total factor productivity questions together. Because all these questions pertain to our strategies to grow our Singapore companies and create good jobs for Singaporeans. And Mr. Pritam Singh alluded to this issue of the benefits, in fact asked by Mr. Leong Eng Hwa as well, the benefits of our growth towards Singaporeans and non-Singaporeans. Let me take the second question first, which is fundamental. Have economic growth and job creation benefited Singaporeans? And more importantly, as Mr. Leong Eng Hwa asked, have economic growth and job creation benefited Singaporeans more than foreigners? Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the short answer to both questions is a resounding yes. This government puts Singaporeans at the heart of everything we do. We pursue growth not for growth's sake alone. We pursue growth so as to improve the lives of Singaporeans. I believe Singaporeans understand and support the government's position. At the same time, we must acknowledge the anxieties that lie behind the members' questions. Responsible political leaders must try to allay those anxieties, not prey on people's fears for political advantage. We have all met Singaporeans who are concerned about the future, especially in times of economic uncertainties. Some may have been displaced and are looking for a new job. Others may still be employed but are wary and worry whether they are ready for the future. In short, we have all met many Singaporeans who worry whether tomorrow will be better than today. To all fellow Singaporeans, I will say this. We understand your worries, and we will walk this journey with you. The government will always have your backs. This is why we have invested so much in Skills Futures and programs like Adapt and Grow and the professional conversion programs. This is why continuing education has been our priority. If we take 20 years to prepare for our first job, it is not enough for us just to assume that the next 30, 40 years of our career lifespan, we do not need any fresh, new injection of training and skills. We do all this to help Singaporeans to prepare for future jobs so that those currently employed can remain future employed. And as I've always said when I was in NTUC, we are not satisfied to put today's unemployed into today's job. Neither are we satisfied to put today's unemployed into tomorrow's job. We want to prepare tomorrow's unemployed, put them into tomorrow's jobs ahead of time. We are also aware that mature Singaporeans in the middle of their careers may be more anxious about the future. Many of them may not have done any upgrading since they started work 20 years ago after their studies. And I want to assure this group of Singaporeans that the government will do more to support them in staying skilled and employable, not just for now, but also for the future. We will talk more about this in the budget. It is not just about lifelong employment, it is about lifelong employability. The crux of the members' questions is this: have we gotten the local-foreign workforce balance right? Not just in terms of quantity, but also in terms of quality. These are questions that the government and our economic agencies constantly ask ourselves. Too few foreign workers, especially PMETs with skills required for our growth sectors, mean that our businesses cannot seize the opportunities out there and in the process create better jobs for all Singaporeans. Too many, and there will be pushback, especially if Singaporeans feel unfairly treated. It is a never-ending balancing act with difficult trade-offs. I often ask Singaporeans when I meet them, if we can only bring in one more foreigner to complement the Singapore workforce, one more, who will we bring in? Someone who is above our national average, or someone who is below our national average? The most memorable answer that I've ever been given was by a young student. He told me, "Minister sir, the answer is simple. Bring in the above average one to grow the economy, but below me. Bring in the above average one to grow the economy, but below me." This summarizes the fears, concerns, and aspirations of our people. We know we need the above average foreigner to complement our domestic workforce so that we can build a more competitive economy and to provide better jobs and better pay for all Singaporeans. But we also know that foreigners will compete with us, and we need to provide some safeguards for our people. This is an evergreen challenge. How do we grow our existing companies and bring in new investment that can create good jobs for Singaporeans? Suppose a Singaporean worker is earning $5,000 today. And we have an option to bring in a new investment that will create 2 new jobs. One paying $7,000 and another one paying $10,000. The Singaporean can only get a $7,000 job today because he does not yet have the skill or experience for the $10,000 job. Should we take the investment? The Singaporean may feel frustrated. He may think that he's being unequally treated because the foreigner earns more than him now. We understand these sentiments. We also want the $10,000 job to go to the Singaporean. But if we do not accept that investment for this reason, it will go elsewhere, and both the $7,000 and the $10,000 jobs will disappear from Singapore. The Singaporean will continue to earn the $5,000 job, and he will have fewer opportunities to rise to a higher paying job. But what is even more important, his son or daughter, currently in school, receiving one of the best education in the world, will not be able to aspire to the $7,000 or $10,000 job. So which is the better outcome, and what should we do and do right by Singaporeans? Not just for this generation, but for the next. Now, is this story very far-fetched? No. It has happened before. Indeed, in every generation throughout our history as an independent nation, we can learn from how the previous generations deal with this challenge and dilemma. In the 1970s, this happened when we went out to attract the electronics industries. Over a span of 3 years, the first 3 semiconductor companies in Singapore, National Semiconductor, Fairchild, and Texas Instruments, created more than 7,000 jobs. But our people did not get the best paying jobs immediately. They certainly didn't get all the best paying jobs immediately. Indeed, many of our pioneer and Merdeka generations work under higher paying foreigners. This was because at that point in time, we lacked the skills and the experience to take the highest paying jobs. But we did not reject these investments as a result. Instead, we worked hard, we learned, we upgraded our capabilities, but at no time did we fear. And in time, we took over many of these higher paying jobs, including the better trained and educated children of the pioneer and Merdeka generations. Many of those early engineers and technicians went on to become senior executives in this sector, and in turn, they mentored a new generation of Singaporean technicians and engineers in the semicon industry that we have today. Today, the same thing is happening in the ICT and software industries. ICT and software will underpin many other industries that we desire to have in the future. Banking, finance, advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, precision medicine, and so forth. They all need highly specialized skills and knowledge. When global companies like Google, Grab, and Facebook invest here, the reality is that we do not have enough Singaporeans with the relevant skills and experience to fill all the jobs they are going to create. We have raised our intake of computer science in our universities in recent years, but there is a limit to further increases. Not every student has the interest or aptitude to study computer science, and we also need to groom talent in other sectors for our economy. Young Singaporeans who are coming out from the universities and polytechnics to join these new companies are better educated and have much better opportunities than the previous generations before them. Colloquially, as we say, our future generation do not need to take over the jobs of the previous generation, earning the salaries of the previous generation. So do we go out and attract these investments like Google, Grab, and Facebook, not just for this generation, but more importantly, for the next generation? What should our choice be? I say we go for it. Land the investment first, just as our previous generations did in the electronics industry. Create those jobs in Singapore first. Otherwise, we lose the $7,000 job, and we may never get the $10,000 job. Work hard, train our people, upgrade our skills to take over that 10,000 job as soon as possible. But do not exploit the sentiments to create envy, anger, and frustration towards that foreigner who is now taking the $10,000 job. I ask the House frankly, do we agree with this approach? Do we hold that we should reject investment on the grounds that the investment will result in more foreigners in Singapore and some earning more than Singaporeans in the same company? Will we reject the investment from Google, Grab, and Facebook? I think most Singaporeans understand and accept why we cannot reject such investments on that basis. Singaporeans are fair-minded. What Singaporeans want is a fair chance to get that $10,000 job as time goes by, if not as soon as possible. What Singaporeans do not want are unfair employment practices where Singaporeans are passed over for non-meritocratic considerations. The government understands these concerns, and we stand together with fellow Singaporeans on this matter. This is why MOM has the fair consideration framework and is continually updating the system to ensure a fair, level playing field for Singaporeans. This is our commitment to Singaporeans. MPI and our economic agencies will watch over the enterprises to get them to train up and groom Singaporeans as part of this commitment to Singapore. I believe the vast majority of our companies know the deal. They play ball. They groom Singaporeans, not just because we ask them to, but because it makes business sense for them to localize and avoid concentration risks for business continuity, as well as to grow the Singapore ecosystem and win the support and respect of fellow Singaporeans and for generations of Singaporeans to come. That's how successful enterprises have done well in Singapore. However, we do know that there are some black sheep amongst the enterprises. Their employment practices must change. If not, we will come down hard on them. They know this. We have taken actions against them, and we will not hesitate to do so again. Businesses also understand the need to be responsible employers. They keep asking the government to relax the foreign workforce controls because they want to expand their businesses. They tell us that they cannot get enough Singaporeans to do all the jobs available. Our answer to them is simply this: work with us. Help us to manage the sense of fair play and opportunity for all Singaporeans. Our businesses understand this, and they are responding. This government is on the side of all Singaporeans. We will grow our economy and attract investments to create many good jobs for Singaporeans. We will continue to devote resources to help our people stay competitive through lifelong learning and skills upgrading so that they can continue to stay relevant and move into higher paying jobs. Unlike other countries, Singapore does not need to fear competition, and Singaporeans do not need to fear competition. We know we have to remain open to the world. We know that a Singapore that is closed in cannot survive. We have the resilience to overcome challenges and the means to help ourselves. And this is important. We have the means to help our workers. Not every country can say that. Not many countries have the political mandate, the political will, or the necessary resources to do that for their workers. That's why their workers push back against global integration, trade liberalization, and so forth. But we are different. And we can continue to distinguish ourselves through our tripartite partnership to make sure that our workers are never left behind. That while we seize these new opportunities, our workers will have every opportunity to get that 10,000 job as soon as possible. So long as we have the drive and stay united as one people, building on the strong tripartite partnership, we will win together as Team Singapore. Now, overall, this balanced approach has worked for Singaporeans. Between 2015 and 2018, local employment increased by nearly 60,000 for the whole economy, local employment. The PMAT share of local employment increased to 57%, one of the highest rates in the world. It means that for every 100 Singaporeans in the workforce, 57 of them are in PMAT jobs, one of the highest in the world. And the trend is continuing to grow in that way, because we understand the aspirations of our next generation. If 70% of our people are going to graduate with degrees and diplomas, you can see the tremendous pressure on the aspirations for the next generation. Our youth unemployment is amongst the lowest amongst the advanced economies, testimony to the fact that our education system is providing the right foundation for our people to take up those jobs that are being created in the new economy. This is not something that happens naturally in every country. In fact, in many other countries, many of them in the Asia Pacific, you will see youth unemployment as one of the most significant challenges for those countries. What about growth in earnings? Growth in real wage monthly earnings for employed locals was 3.2% per annum during this period, higher than the 2.4% per annum in the preceding 3 years, higher than most advanced economies such as the US, which is 0.5%, Japan 0.8%, Germany 1.2%, we are at 3.2%. But let's not be complacent. It requires a lot of hard work on the ITM side as well. ITM is a system that we put in place for us to pull together companies, trade associations, unions, governments, research institutions, all 5 partners coming together to transform the industries. Because the old way of competing to raise productivity just by increasing factor input of labor and capital can only go so far. The next step of our economic development will require us to increase our productivity, not just through the injection of capital and labor, but through the innovation, the revamp of our business model, our internationalization, our scale economies that we can achieve through expanding our economy, not just in Singapore, but beyond. Now, all these are important work for us to work together to use the ITM as the platform to raise the total factor productivity so that our workers can continue to enjoy sustainable real wage growth in the years going out. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I hope that I've given you a comprehensive answer on the questions that both Mr. Pritam Singh and Mr. Liang Eng-Hwa asked. The answer is yes. We have done the right things by getting that balance right. And the government will continue to calibrate this balance carefully. That balance is struck by considering 3 factors: the needs of our industries and enterprises, the needs of our workers of this generation, and the opportunities for our children in the next generation. If we get this balance right, as we strive for this Goldilocks balance, we must firmly reject extreme positions. The extreme positions being to open the floodgates and drown Singaporeans. But neither can we take the other extreme position to close our borders and reject foreigners in our workforce. Above all, in this House, we must firmly reject efforts to stoke anti-foreigner sentiments by spreading falsehoods or creating invidious comparisons out of context. This is not the kind of politics we want, with far-right parties in the European continent stirring hate and fear against foreigners for political advantage. This is not how Singapore transforms ourselves from third world to first, and this is not how a confident and capable Singapore should face the future. Yes, the future will pose many challenges, but the future will also pose many exciting opportunities. We'll continue to work with Singaporeans to steer the Singapore ship through the stormy seas, and we'll make sure that we will not allow opportunists to stir fear and hatred amongst ourselves. The real competition is not between the Singaporean versus the PR here versus the foreigner here. The real competition is the Team Singapore, comprising of Singaporeans, PRs, and foreign workers here, competing with the rest of the world to give our fellow Singaporeans the best chance possible to win, not just only in Singapore, but across the entire globe. That the wages of our Singaporean workers will continue to grow faster than the rest of the other people in other countries. On that note, let us work together to go through these difficult moments.
Mr. Patrick Tay.
I have two supplementary questions for the Minister of State and Manpower, as well as one supplementary question for the Minister of Trade Industry. Firstly, on the massive amount of job created because of the ITMs. My two questions. Firstly is, how is MOM ensuring that as we create all these jobs, how do we level the playing field to ensure that the firms that create these jobs are considered Singaporeans fairly? And the second question is, now that we have the fair consideration framework as well as other employment pass criteria in place, and the FCF has started since 2014, is MOM considering reviewing it and looking at tighter measures to ensure that recalcitrant companies who do abuse that are watched carefully? And for the Minister of Trade and Industry, can I have assurance, and also I urge him that, as we plan our strategies to attract investments and as we plan our winning moves for the future, can we ensure that our various economic agencies put Singaporeans, not just jobs of Singaporeans, but quality jobs of Singaporeans front and center in all their strategy papers?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, our manpower policies have, benefited many Singaporeans over the years. And we've also benefited from the international trade flows and international flows. So, as shared by Min of MTI earlier on, a calibrated flow of foreigners to supplement our workforce has also been useful, especially as it takes time to build skills that emerging industry need. So I use the term calibrated workflow because we know, and the employers also know, they cannot be free flow. So we use a combination of policy levers to manage the outcome of foreign manpower and to safeguard good employment outcomes for our people. So, for example, we raised the S-Pass minimum qualifying criteria in 2019 and 2020, as well as the EP minimum qualifying criteria in 2017. So this helps us keep pace with rising local wages and enhance the foreign dependency, the foreign workforce complementarity to the local workforce. So we are also reducing the services sector dependency ratio ceiling, or DRC, and surplus DRC over this year, 2020 and 2021. To push businesses to become more manpower lean and improve job quality. So as a result, local PMET employment, as Minister shared, has risen. So the PMET share of local employment rose from 54% in 2015 to 57% in 2018. And citizen unemployment is 3% in 2018 and has averaged 3.1% since 2015. And we've also seen growth in median income, right, rising at 3.8% per annum since 2015, which is higher than 3.3% the preceding 3 years. So I think it's important that as we look at these outcomes, while we talk about headline outcomes, it is also the individual work that we do on the ground, like the A&G, where we manage and support and help job match Singaporeans to all these new jobs. These are also important aspects in which all these things play a role, how we upgrade our workers, how we invest in them, how we put in place infrastructure to ensure that our workers are trained to sufficiently address these jobs. So it is all these combination of small efforts that we have on the ground that contribute to the overall outcomes. To the member's question on how to keep the playing field fair, So we also take a firm stand against employers that discriminate against Singaporeans. So just last week, Minister for Manpower announced plans to update the fair consideration framework, and businesses that deliberately exclude qualified Singaporean job seekers will suffer stiffer penalties. So members have to wait, unfortunately, because we will announce more details next week by Minister. So I think it's important that when it comes to jobs growth, we remind ourselves that we are squarely focused on Singaporeans. We must not be blind to the needs of businesses as well, and how good jobs are created today. So I hope that members in this House too will agree that we all need to be honest with our people, that the competition for jobs, the competition for investments is out there. It is international. So we want to secure the best outcomes for Singaporeans by not shutting out foreigners, but by giving our people the best available support to develop themselves and ensure that businesses practice fair employment and give Singaporeans a fair chance. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Leon Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I just have 4 supplementary questions for the Minister, Minister Chun. Firstly, on total factor productivity, does MTI monitor the outliers of TFP, those countries which are performing above the OECD average on TFP, to look at patterns that we might possibly be able to learn from? For example, there is a fair bit of academic evidence to suggest, not conclusively of course, but to suggest possibly that R&D share of GDP could actually be an indicator of TFP growth and high TFP contribution, R&D share of GDP. So is that something that MTI looks at, the outliers of TFP and what we could learn from that? Secondly, in terms of the health of the economy, which the Minister spoke about, what is MTI's sense looking at forward economic indicators such as PMI, confidence indicators, and the totality of forward-looking indicators in terms of, is the economic growth going to improve or actually stagnate or decrease in the first quarter of this year, looking at the forward-looking indicators that we have. Thirdly, the Minister spoke also about PMETs, and I think one problem that many members of the House do come across in our work is this phenomenon of underemployment of PMETs who lose their job for whatever reason in their 40s or 50s and end up taking a job at a substantially lower pay, which may or may not fully utilize the qualifications they have. Would the Minister consider looking into creating an underemployment indicator to measure how we are doing in terms of underemployment? There is currently a time-based underemployment indicator, but that just measures part-time work. Will some thought be given to a measure of underemployment in terms of pay and qualifications, so that at least we know how well we are doing on this front going forward, given that this may be a structural issue as Singapore and other economies face as well? And lastly, the Minister spoke about youth unemployment. What is the Minister's sense of how we are trending in terms of the time taken for our youth to come out of universities, polytechnic, ITE, the time that they take to find permanent employment as opposed to contract employment, as opposed to internships? Anecdotally, we do hear that there are some challenges there. For example, one resident I encountered said that his daughter graduated from one of our autonomous universities, 6 months was still looking for a job. Of course, that's just one data point, but what is the trend that the Minister sees on this front going forward? Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, if you don't mind, maybe I complete the answers for Mr. Patrick Tay's question first, then I'll go on to the 4 supplementary questions from member Mr. Leon Pereira. Mr. Patrick Tay asked whether the economic agencies will put Singaporeans front and center in our search for investment and creation for quality jobs. The answer is YES in capital letter. Yes, we do that. We have always done that. We are doing that, and we'll continue to do that. Yes. Let me just share a bit about the work of EDB, ASG, and so forth. People have asked me, why don't we go and take all the investments that's queuing up at our doors? And there's a simple way to do so. But for every investment that we take into Singapore today, we not only consider the land constraints, the carbon constraints, the energy usage, and all that kind of things, but most importantly, as you have said, we ask ourselves, is this going to create a good job for Singaporeans? Can our Singaporeans take on this job? If not now, if not immediately, can it be in the near future? If not this generation, can it be the next generation in the fastest possible time? And we have always abided by that principle. Because what's the point of creating the jobs in Singapore if the Singaporeans got no chance of ever doing it? What's the point of having a good job in Singapore if the Singaporeans never have a chance to do it? But how long will it take? It depends. Edward Life Sciences, making heart valves. We converted, when they wanted to make heart valves, they needed seamstress. We don't have many seamstress in Singapore anymore. We went out to search for many homemakers who at least still know how to sew. Train them. Heart valves is not a joke, no. One is $20,000, $30,000 with high quality control. So we look at the job, we see whether Singaporeans can do it. I'll give you another example. On the other side of the spectrum, ExxonMobil and Shell. They've been in Singapore for decades. Today we are very proud. The head of ExxonMobil operations in Singapore and Shell, they are both Singaporeans. But they didn't get to the top job to head the ExxonMobil and Shell operations in Singapore in one step. Gan, Swee Chen, they all went around the world, took on various appointments in ExxonMobil and Shell, acquired the skills, acquired the experience, and today, these top jobs are held by Singaporeans. We are very proud of that. But we never fear. Because when ExxonMobil and Shell first came to Singapore, we were far away from taking any of those top jobs. But today, we have people there. So that's my assurance to Mr. Patrick Tay and all the brothers and sisters in the labour movement. You have an ex-SecGen as Minister of Trade and Industry now. To the four questions that Mr. Leon Pereira asked, first one, outliers. Indeed, we look at all the outliers. Indeed, we look at everyone that does better than us and ask ourselves, why are they doing better than us? But I want to caution against reading too much into some of the statistical anomalies, because statistically, the TFP is a residue after you take away the capital and the labour inputs. In fact, as an example, during the global financial crisis, when we rebounded from the global financial crisis, that particular year, our TFP was over 9%. Cannot be accounted for by all the labour and input factors. It is probably accounted largely by the growth, momentum, and the scale economies that we can, not even just by the research, R&D, and so forth. But we are highly cognizant of the fact that going forward, for us to improve our productivity, we need to emphasize much more on research and development, and not just research and development, but the translation of the outcomes of research and development into commercial enterprises. And we are going to do that. That's why I talked about just now the revamping of our business models, internationalization, and so forth. All these will add up to strengthen our total factor productivity beyond a residual of what can be accounted by capital and labor inputs. So that's the answer to the first question. Second question, do we look at forward indicators? Of course. MTI look at all sorts of indicators, and definitely forward indicators. But having said that, you ask, what is the outlook for the economy this year? We can take a leaf from the economic performance, last year. How did we avoid a recession last year? Last year, a large part of our economy was actually under the water. The global electronics cycle, the downturn, has hit our semiconductor and electronic sector. The structural and cyclical factors have also pulled down our performance in the retail sectors. On the other hand, there are three sectors, three shining examples holding up the economy: banking and finance, professional services, ICT. Now, by design, this is a design feature of our economy. We have diversified our economy. And because we have diversified our economy, we have avoided the extremes of either recession or very sharp ups and very sharp down. That is how we have to continue to navigate carefully. Diversification gives us resilience, but diversification also comes with a cost. When the global electronic cycles goes up, if we have just depended on the global electronic cycle, we might get a 20% growth in that sector. But that is not sustainable. So we have diversified our economy as we mature over the years, and today our performance is much more stable, providing a stable platform for us to continue to investments to create the good jobs for Singaporeans tomorrow. So that's the answer to the second question. To the third question, let me amplify what I have just said. We spent 20 years of our life preparing for the first job. We spent 20 years of training and education preparing every Singaporean child for the first job. But let us ask ourselves, how much do we invest in the next 40, 50 years for the subsequent second, third, fourth, fifth job? This is a challenge which the whole world is waking up to, but not the whole world has the means and the organization to tackle this. We will announce more plans to tackle this in the budget. We know that those people in the 40s and 50s, including those people in the ICT sector, they need a skills top-up. They need a refresh. In fact, when I was in Switzerland some years back as the NTUC SecGen, I learned from the Swiss one thing. They never plan to top up the skills at 55 years old and 60 years old to extend the career lifespan of their people. They told me it's too late. The correct approach is that for every 10 years or so, if we can afford it and have the organization, we should top up the skills of each and every of our workers. And this is the same thing I challenge the public service to do. Even if someone wants to join the public service for 50 years, we cannot assume that the same skill sets will be necessary and sufficient for the 50 years. Continuous training must be into our DNA. And then we can get into lifelong employability and not lifelong employment. So we will do more because we understand. And I would say that it is not, we will start with the 40s, 50s, but if we have the chance, we will extend it down to even the 30s as time comes. Youth unemployment. It is a theoretical argument as to how to calculate underemployment. But what is even most important is not how we calculate underemployment. What is most important to get people out of underemployment is to grow the jobs opportunities for them to go on and take on a better paying jobs. And this is why in MTI strategy, we are spending so much effort to strengthen the mid-sized company so that they can create more and better paying jobs, more opportunities for the rest of the Singaporeans who are not in such high-paying jobs to get into those jobs. So yes, we'll look at all forms of trying to get the statistics, but I'll go beyond what you suggest. And in fact, we have done that. We'll go beyond to make sure that we create those good jobs to pull the Singaporeans out from the lower productivity sectors so that they can enjoy the good wage growth that is commensurate with our economic growth. That is our promise to all Singaporeans.
Last question, Mr. Pritam Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sir, my original parliamentary question really was a question seeking data. Minister for Trade and Industry spoke of the local PMET share going up 54% to 57%. And my question really is, can we expect in future, either by way of parliamentary question or by the government on its own accord, dividing that into Singaporeans and PRs? If the government's approach is no, we are not going to provide that data, can the minister please share that detail with us here? Because it's pointless for us to keep asking for the data if the government is not going to provide it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I don't think we have anything to hide. We have just shared the data.
Mr. Pritam Singh.
Well, sir, if that's the case, then for the number, the 60,000 PMET jobs, local PMET jobs, how many were for Singaporeans and how many went to PRs?
Get you the questions. I mean, we can get you the numbers. But let me say this. What is the point behind the questions? First, has local unemployment increased with all these efforts? The answer is a resounding no. Our people are getting the good jobs. Are our wages going up? Yes, and it's faster than many other countries. Those are the proof points to show that we are doing right by Singaporeans. But I'm always very cautious about this constant divide. Singaporeans versus PR. The insinuation seems to be that somehow the Singaporeans are not benefiting. I have just spent the last half an hour explaining and sharing with this House how we are how we are working hard to make sure that Singaporeans do so. It's not the data, it is the point of the question. And I would like to remind this House, the ultimate competition is not pitting the Singaporeans against the PR. It is about the Team Singapore comprising of Singaporeans, the PRs, and even the foreign workforce complement competing to give the Singaporeans the best chance possible. How many increase in the jobs go to the Singaporeans? Enough for us to keep the unemployment rate at the level which many countries would say is friction. And that is how we have done it.